to cause enough of a hoo-ha over it to get some coverage. It went all over the place on social media. Any which way you can. And stall tactics are a great one too, guys. Just bamboozle them, especially if you know the law well enough. And sadly for the cops in Mullum, I think I knew it a little bit better than most of them did, and enabled to stall us time, get some more numbers down there and get some good coverage on it. While I messed with their heads with some legal jargon, which is proper lawful stuff. And on the legal lawful side too, guys, legal matters are for dead fictitious corporate entities. Lawful matters are for that of us, the living. And that's a massive thing to understand as well. And for those of you who aren't familiar with it, do some research on your straw man. That's what they're after when they arrest you and they fine you. It's not you. There's two of you. This is the birth certificate fraud, UCC1 agreement. I encourage everybody to learn a little bit about that too. Handy stuff to know in the courts as well, because all your fines and debts and everything are for your straw man. They're not for you. They're not for the living. And this is the difference between legalities and lawful matters too. And that's an important one to know and to learn a bit about as well. And then outside of that, we've got our rights. And again, no law has the power to remove our rights. They're inalienable. They are God-given rights, and we're born with them.
I think you're teaching people a lot of stuff. Like we, as Australians, because we think we're in the lucky country and we're just going to go by what the government tells us and follow the narrative, we don't look into our laws as such. We sort of go day by day. And what people are doing, I can see in the comments, they're sort of waking up and saying, I'd never realized any of this was there. I think the biggest problem that people are finding, and you've heard this over the last week when we've been talking off air, is what do we do next? Because the problem, or the what we were saying with Mullumbimby is, if we can get a good result in Mullumbimby, it could be where, if it's a legal result that we go through the courts, we can roll it out to other places around Australia, or like Mark Steele was saying earlier, what they do in the UK and other places, South Africa, we can roll into Australia. So we need some wins so we can then put it in the places in other places. And I think people are starting to think they need a ZEV in every town, because when these towers start going up into their town, they want to protest or they want to say no, but they don't know their legal rights. And we just don't have enough ZEVs to go around at the moment. But I feel like it's such a big thing right now that we need to fight. We need to say no. Social media is a good platform to get the word out to people who are ready to be awoken, but we really need to then try and find a way to spread the word beyond that. So I know you're working on some stuff, and I find that your knowledge is something that people need to know. Like whether you start your own YouTube page or what you do, we need to hear more from you on what we can do and what our rights are.
Yeah, well, look, I'm looking at all the comments coming up. I can't see names though, guys. All I'm seeing is Facebook user from everybody, but thank you for the comments. Look, for some of the questions you guys are asking, start reading up on the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Australia. Most people are unaware of this too. We have two constitutions in this country. One's not worth the paper it's printed on. Our Constitution of the Commonwealth of Australia, written in 1900-901, the Quick and Garum version, that's gold. That's got a lot of our rights and entitlements in it for here in Australia. We also have the Constitution of Australia, which is not worth the paper it's printed on. That's for the corporate governance that we call a government, that's registered as its own company with an ABN that trades on the stock exchanges and stuff in the States. And then we've got the Constitution Act, which is exactly that. It's an act. The legal term of act is something acting or pretending to be. So in this, we've got all these pieces of paper called acts, and they're pieces of paper acting as law. They haven't been through the due process. They don't have proclamation certificates. There's no royal assent, no commencement date, and they haven't been read a minimum of 3 times in Parliament to be enacted as an actual law. And this was my argument with the police in Mullum the other day. With their COVID restrictions and regulations, they're not bloody laws. They haven't been through the due process. And this is also my argument with the 5G. It hasn't been through the due process to actually be considered safe. And when we're setting our safety limits so ridiculously high, it's pretty easy to comply with it. I mean, I've been saying to a few guys, it's like setting the speed limit out the front of the schools at 300 k's an hour. No one's speeding out the front of the schools. And they've done the same approach with 5G. We've set the safety levels so stupidly high based on bad science, biased research, and they're only testing for thermal effects of non-ionizing radiation when it affects so much more than that. And this is again part of the problem, that the scientific community are not in agreement on this. And this is
Yep.
part of why there's such a push from communities everywhere. We need to get that global scientific community with independent research that's not input or influenced or funded by the telcos, and use that science, because any of the telco science, there's a 50 to 60% discrepancy in the results coming from independent versus industry science. That
Yes.
alone should be alarm bells for most people, that that's the case, and that needs to be seriously looked at. And with our government going on bloody holidays, as they like to do when there's an emergency, it's very hard to get this stuff put through. You know, we had bushfires and our PM buggers off to Hawaii for a holiday, got the whole world in lockdown and pandemic, and we're all having meetings on Zoom and chatting via online and stuff to sort out what we're doing. Where the hell's our government? Why aren't they sitting in
Yeah.
Parliament? And if they want to make these bullshit laws, get Parliament up and running, do the due process, and see how you go about actually making it into a law. Until that happens, guys, we've got the right to protest. We've got the right to stand up. We have many rights.
Yeah.
And looking through again, guys, our Constitution of the Commonwealth of Australia. That's what you want to look at, you know. It's a very different set of laws, and a lot of the side of our laws, which a lot of the guys in the common law circles, for example, that I'm had a bit to do with over the years, all of our laws are done under the Queen of Australia. We don't have a Queen of Australia.
Yeah,
It's a
that's it.
fictional corporate entity. And making all the laws done under that null, void, and illegal. It's fraud. It's fraud at the
Yeah.
highest level. Our entire
Yeah.
system, legally and judiciary, is built on lies and deceit. And that's what makes it so tricky in the courts and with the police to deal with this, is understanding how deep that deceit goes. And the language of legalese just helps to make it even trickier for average blokes like you and me to actually understand this stuff. I've been
I
researching and learning and
me.
doing this for 20 odd years. You know, I'm still learning. I still don't claim to be an expert here. I've got heaps more to learn, but it's tricky. Guys are asking about, you know, what court direction can we take? Well, we're looking into that, because the courts aren't really operating at the moment either. And
Yeah.
it's everyone's on bloody holidays as far as any government and department goes. And as you'll be aware with your group, Matt, we've been with multiple groups I've been joining up with and trying to help them.
Yep.
We've been sending emails and letters to politicians and MPs and at local, state, and federal levels, and to all the government departments. No one wants to answer our questions. We're getting
Ah,
handballed from department to department. Even the freedom of information requests we've made, oh, that's not our department, we'll send it to someone else. And then they go, oh, that's not our thing, we'll send it over here. And after you've been handballed 5 or 6 times, you end up back where you started. And
yeah.
again, I try to explain this to the police.
Yeah.
It's
No.
disgusting. And the cops go, well, you need to find another way of protesting. I'm like, we have exhausted every single other bloody avenue that we have to get our voice heard. And the last thing we have is to stand up for our rights. And if required, when they're actually doing the work on the towers, get out and protest it, you know. And we have the right to do that, guys. We have the right to protest. And it's a massive thing to know that our rights are, I keep saying it, no law has the power to remove our rights. And the government and our courts and the police didn't give us those rights. Therefore, they have no authority or jurisdiction to remove those rights from any of us. So do some reading, guys. Do some research. Join some of the common law groups and stuff on social media, and the Get Out of Paying Fines and Rego Mob, all them sort of mobs. Learn what you can. I'll probably get slammed for this one, but avoid the Know Your Rights group. Mike Palmer he's very knowledgeable, but he's
Yeah.
great at making a lot of money off semi-accurate info, and he's barking up the right tree, but he's got the wrong goddamn forest. So there are other
Yeah.
better groups like the CLRA mobs, the Commonwealth Law Reform Australia. There's a lot of mobs there. There's an amazing brains trust behind some of these groups, and plenty of information there for everybody on how you're able to lawfully exercise your rights without getting in trouble. Those of you who saw the footage in Mullumbimby, none of us got arrested the other day. Because I knew what we were doing. A lot of the crew there were quite well versed in this too, and we're actually able to hold them off, avoid anyone getting arrested. We avoided a potentially ugly scene, and we didn't see the need in anyone get arrested because there was no cherry picker there to do the upgrade. There was no Telstra workers. So we were kind of a bit nicer to the cops and went, yeah, all right, we'll bugger off. We'll thin the numbers out because there's no work to stop. But with the phone list and all that the Mullumbimby guys have got and the vigil they've got going, they try and sneak in. There's going to be hundreds of us to send on that within a very short space of time. It's not going to be a good look for them. So if you're our locals, guys, and you're around Mullum or anywhere like that, ring up all the hire companies that hire out these big cherry pickers and warn them that if I owned a
Yeah.
machine worth $500,000, I wouldn't want an angry town, a big angry mob crowding around my machine worth that kind of money either. Another way to get to them, hit them where it hurts, guys. Go for the money. That's the only thing they listen to, and a lot of the campaigns I've been involved in, we can cost them. We can't stop them, but if we cost them enough money, it becomes no longer viable, and then they make their own choice to bugger off, and that can be a really handy way of approaching some of this as well, and especially going after the companies that hire them and supply their equipment and machinery and stuff to get onto them. The shareholders, tell them what's going on, hit them where the money is, and that's another good way, a very effective way of lobbying, especially when our government and our regulatory departments won't listen to us. Go to the guys that pay them. Go to the guys whose infrastructure they need to do it. Hassle them. And that's another effective way of bypassing it when we don't get listened to.
I think that's right. I think what you're saying is all very, very much spot on. I think you may have a business outside of this by the looks of the comments, being the bushy lawyer. I feel like over the next couple of days, you're going to be quite busy up there. Obviously, the police are going to come back in numbers. It may end up being a numbers game, but it sounds like the negotiating is happening to an extent. I think the things you said with hitting people in their back pocket is a really good thing as well. The more that people talk amongst each other, whether they bring them into these groups or not to find the facts, because once people have the facts, they can then spread it further on. But what you're saying is true. We get stuck at a point where legalities aren't going through and other things. We will at some stage probably have to protest and be, when lockdown's over, go out in numbers and say this isn't right, because it is a human right to say we want our safety and we want the safety of our kids as well. But I feel like looking at the legalities and understanding your rights is a very important thing before you do any stepping out of any door anywhere anyway. And the information spreading is fantastic. And it's a godsend to know someone like you, and it's amazing that you are happy to share that with other people as well, because it is hard being sort of in front of people when you are looked at as going against, the norm. But people need to understand their rights, and I feel like it's fantastic that you're sharing that. And I don't want to cut you short. I might get you back on later on if you're still awake, but I've got a couple of people lined up to play some live music.
Oh, cool. All right, well, I'll stick around. I'll be up for a little while, so I'll come and go another chat. Just quickly, guys, CLRA, the Commonwealth Law Reform Australia, they're an awesome mob. Get out of fines and paying Rego, which is Ned Kelly that moderates. Awesome bloke as well, very knowledgeable. And look out for the Commonwealth and the Constitution of the Commonwealth sites and stuff on Facebook as well. There's some amazing guys on there with some solid and sound knowledge around all this stuff as well, and plenty for us all to learn from.
Brilliant, Seb. Thank you so much again. And as I said, if you're up in another couple of hours, I might need some filling, and we might be on the next video, and people might want to hear some more, because it's the knowledge that people need. And I feel like it's comforting to understand that we do have rights, even though we feel like they've all been stripped. We just need to be a little bit more cunning with how we do things, I think.
Yeah, it's just putting it eloquently and learning to not have the fear about it, come from the heart and stand up for those rights and word it properly. And it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks again, brother, and be safe, and I'll talk to you again soon.
All right, thanks, Matt. See you guys.